Hey guys, this is Bart Hanson for Crush Live Poker. Today we're going to talk a little bit about gambling taxation. Do me a favor, if you like the video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, I need to preface this video by saying I am not a tax professional. I am not a CPA. However, I've been a professional gambler for over 15 years and I've worked closely with my CPA, and I'm going to put his details in the description. His name is rcfox. I've worked closely with him over that period of time, and I really feel like I have an understanding of this sector, basically. And a lot of poker players really don't have any idea. And the first thing I want to say is that for tax purposes, any type of gambling is treated the same. Meaning, if you win money from poker and then you also win money from roulette or sports gambling, that is all clumped together. Same thing with losses too. You could win money from poker and then offset those wins with, say, craps losses. So it's all clumped into one, basically. Now, there are two ways that you claim your gambling income. The first way, which is probably 99.9% of all filers, is to file as a recreational player. And then the second way is to file as a professional gambler. And we're going to go over both of those different avenues. And some lucky people actually have a choice of whether or not they want to file as a recreational player or a professional. There are some advantages and disadvantages really to both. But first of all, as a recreational player, basically the way that you file is you take all of your winnings and you file them as other income on Schedule A, and then you offset your winnings with your losses in an itemized deductions. And, one of the things that people don't understand is that you are not allowed to net. So say you're a poker player and you play, say, 100 times a year, and, you keep records, and obviously keeping records is very important. And let's say that you net $20,000. Well, you're not allowed to just put $20,000 in wins. You're supposed to total up every single day your winning sessions, put that as your wins in other income, and then take all your losses on a session basis, combine those up, and deduct that as an itemized deduction for gambling losses. A couple of quirky things can happen with this because you need to file all of your wins and other income. Your AGI gets pretty grossly inflated, and sometimes you can lose out with some benefits that the government bases upon your AGI. But secondly, and most importantly, especially since the Republican tax bill of 2018, if you want to offset your losses as a recreational player, you must itemize your deductions. 90% of the US population takes the standard deduction. And especially now, since 2018, where the standard deduction has been raised, where an individual has $12,200, or a married couple filing jointly has $24,400 as their standard deduction, 90% of households are going to take the standard deduction because it's going to be larger than if you itemized your deductions. Some of the large itemized deductions that, say, like a non-gambler would have would be like mortgage interest, local taxes up to a certain point, etc., etc. Well, if you don't have, as an individual, over $12,200 in deductions, then you would take the standard deduction, because the standard deduction, they're allowing you to take $12,200. So if you're a recreational poker player, and let's say, for example, you walked into a casino only maybe 3 times for the year, and you won a jackpot of $15,000, but in the other 2 times that you were in there, you lost it. You lost $15,000. And let's say you were married. So your standard deduction for your household was, $24.4K. You would have 2 options. You could either deduct $24,400 for your household for your standard deduction, or you could deduct your gambling losses, which would be $15,000. Well, which deduction's larger? Well, it's the standard deduction. So since the standard deduction has been raised, recreational gamblers, it's kind of a disadvantage to them, because if they have a lot of gambling wins that need to be offset by gambling losses, they don't get to take the standard deduction. They're offsetting all of their wins with their losses, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too when we get to professional gamblers, because you could have $100,000 in wins and $100,000 in losses. Well, you have to itemize because you want to offset your wins, so you take $100,000 in losses, like you're a net loser. By the way, you can only claim as much losses as you've claimed wins, but now you don't get the standard deduction. And what I mean by that is, like, your net is zero. You compare yourself to, say, like a non-gambler, but because you've had to itemize, you don't get the 12.2 or the 24.4 deduction past that your friend who's never gambled gets, because he's taking the standard deduction. Whereas you don't get to take the standard deduction. You have to itemize because you have to file against your losses. So that's a pretty large disadvantage now with the recreational gambler. One of the other things too that people often confuse is that if you're not a professional gambler, you don't get to make business deductions. You can't go and travel around and say, oh, I'm going to deduct my hotel, my meals, my travel, my car, my flights. None of that. You cannot take business deductions if you're not a business. So, I mean, that's kind of the whole thing with recreational gambling. There's another couple other things too, is that if you live in certain states, they don't allow you to take gambling losses as an itemized deduction at the state level. So, for example, in Massachusetts, which is one of those states, if you bank a $200,000 tournament and you're a net loser in gambling for the year, sure, you're going to itemize, you're going to offset that with $200,000 in losses at the federal level. But Massachusetts doesn't allow that to be done at the state level. And Massachusetts state income tax is 5%. So you're going to pay 5% on $200,000 in basically phantom winnings. Now, a lot of people say, man, that's so unfair. Why would anybody actually ever file by the letter of the law? Like, if I'm a cash game player and I don't have any W-2Gs, why would I file like all by a session and then offset my losses? Like, how would they ever know? Well, they probably would never know, but it's the law, and that's the way that you're supposed to file. A lot of times people will get caught when they net their gambling income as a recreational player, and they fail to realize that their W-2Gs are reported to the IRS. So let's say, well, again, you're a net loser, you're net zero, and you have $50,000 in tournament winnings, and you're like, well, I don't owe the IRS anything, I'm just going to claim zero. Well, the IRS has your W-2Gs on file. So it would definitely behoove you'll get a notice, an automatic notice right away saying that you filed incorrectly. You have to file $50,000 in wins and then offset it with $50,000 in losses, okay? Now you say, well, why wouldn't I just try to file as a professional gambler then if I can net my wins and losses? And a professional gambler can net their wins and losses. They don't have to file all of their wins and offset with all of their losses. They can net. Now, the advantage of netting also is that people get confused with personal deductions and business deductions. Like I was talking about before, when you offset your wins with your losses at the recreational level, you are itemized personal deductions, okay? Business deductions are entirely different. If you file as a professional, you get to make business deductions. You can deduct training, you can deduct travel, all the common types of things that you can deduct with a business. Those are business deductions. So as a professional gambler, let's say that you net $50,000 for the year, and then you have $10,000 in business deductions. Well, so you're going to have $50,000 in income and then $10,000 in deductions. Your overall business income is going to be $40,000, right? At that point, you then choose whether or not you want to take the standard deduction or itemize. And like 90% of the people, if you don't have a huge, mortgage and you're not bringing in, you're not paying a lot of mortgage interest, you're going to take the standard deduction. So if you file as a professional player, you've got $40,000 in business income and you get to take the standard deduction. Because you don't have to itemize your losses. You get to net your wins and losses as a professional. This is filing on a Schedule C. Whereas that recreational player, with the $50,000 in wins and the $50,000 in losses, he has to itemize. and he loses his standard deduction. So you'd say, Bart, well, why wouldn't everybody just try to file as a professional? Well, there's one thing about filing a Schedule C, and that is, of course, that you have to pay self-employment tax on top of your income tax. So any contractor or anyone who's self-employed has to pay an additional 15.3% in self-employment tax up to $132,900. So you're going to have to pay extra tax if you're self-employed. Now, people who earn wage income, they pay this tax too, but their employer pays half of it for the Social Security, and it's sort of on that FICA line. So it's not like self-employed people are getting, gypped. It's just that this is how you pay into Social Security and Medicare because you don't have an employer that's taking it out of your paycheck. So if you file as a professional, you get to make business deductions. You don't have to itemize to take losses, so most people will be able to take a standard deduction, but you have to pay an additional 15.3% on the first $132,900 that you make. Then after $132,900, you have to pay 2.9% on top of that. So it's it's basically 15.3% on the first $132,900, and then 2.9% above that. If you make over $250,000, you have to pay, I believe, an extra 0.9% on top of that on everything above $250,000. So, you can look at it a couple of different ways if you were to have a choice of filing as a recreational player or filing as a professional. You can do the numbers out. Do you have a lot of business expenses? Do you travel a lot around to tournaments? Do you, travel to multiple casinos in your home area so that you can take a mileage deduction, things like that? Will those business expenses bring your net down to an amount where paying the extra 15.3% on the first $132,900 is worth it? That's what you really have to look at. Now, most people don't have a choice. The people that have a choice are usually students and retired people. They're the ones that have a choice on whether or not they want to file as a recreational player or as a professional player. The definition, it was brought out in a court case a while back, and it's a little bit vague. Basically, the court said that if one's gambling activity is pursued full-time and with regularity to the production of income for livelihood and is not a mere hobby, you can file as a professional gambler. Now, if you have wage income from another job and you try to file as a professional gambler, obviously that's going to be a flag. It's an aggressive route that some people have successfully taken, but usually the IRS is going to look at this as that, is this your income and livelihood? Is it not just a mere hobby? Do you gamble with enough regularity to call yourself a professional? You are absolutely allowed to file multiple Schedule Cs, however. So in the first example, I was talking about maybe getting paid from a job, having wage income, and then trying to file a Schedule C as a professional gambler. That's an aggressive route that can sometimes be challenged, and not many people probably would be advised to file in that way. That's where I highly recommend going to a guy like my accountant, Russ Fox, whose details are in the description. And Russ tells me that he does about 10 to 15% of all the professional gambling returns in the US. So he is an expert. Like I said, I've been working with him for 15 years. He is a straight shooter. He's not going to tell you how to cheat on your taxes. He's going to tell you that you have to claim all your wins properly and offset all your losses if you're a recreational player. He's not going to tell you how to skate around, but he knows his stuff. He's going to tell you what is the law. And, if you're in a situation where you feel like you possibly may have an option of filing professionally or recreationally, I would highly recommend him. Now, this video is coming out on February 14th. He's obviously slammed. This is like a very, very busy season, for tax guys. So I would, if you're in this situation, I would contact him basically immediately. But what I was saying is that you are absolutely allowed to file multiple Schedule Cs. That actually has been in a tax court case. So you can file a Schedule C for gambling, and you can file a Schedule C for something else as well. So you could have two basically self-employment gigs. A very, very aggressive way to file, and I know somebody personally that has done that, and I don't believe that she was challenged, is if you have wage income or if you have another Schedule C and you've already made over $132,900, because self-employment tax is only paid on the first $132,900, if you've already paid it through basically your payroll tax, your FICA, through to an employer, or if you've already maxed out on your self-employment tax in a different business, in a different Schedule C, you don't have to pay it anymore. That's it. You only have to pay 2.9% past the 132,900 and then the 0.9% above 250,000. So you could get into a situation where you've already paid off all your self-employment tax or had your Social Security and Medicare withheld to the 132,900 threshold through a job. And now you're not going to owe that self-employment tax. So could you file as a professional then? That would be a huge benefit because you would be able to take business deductions and you wouldn't have to pay the 15.3% because you've already paid it. So like I said, that's a very unique situation. That's a very sort of aggressive route that some people may be able to take. A lot of this stuff is a little bit hazy, and that's why I would highly recommend, going to Russ. But it's a question that I get a lot. Should I file as a recreational player? Should I file as a professional? And again, as a recreational player, you don't have to recreational filer, you don't have to, pay the self-employment tax, right? However, you don't get to make business deductions. And if you have to offset your wins with your losses, you're going to lose your standard deduction, which can be pretty big. As a professional, because you get to net your wins and losses, you do get to take the standard deduction for your personal deductions, and you get to make business deductions as well as netting your wins and your losses. The self-employment tax is obviously a big thing. It's an extra 15.3%, up to the 132,900. But there are a couple of things also. There are some things that you can do if you file as a professional. Well, first of all, half of your self-employment tax is basically an adjustment right off the top of your overall return. So you're not really paying the full. So if I pay $20,000 in self-employment tax, I actually get to take a $10,000 deduction from my federal return, or an adjustment, not a deduction, but an adjustment off my AGI, for that amount. There's also some discussion that if you're an LLC in certain situations, an S Corp, as a gambler, that you might be able to take advantage of the Republican QBI, which is basically that pass-through where 20% of your income from a business you can use as a deduction. There are certain phase areas. If you make over a certain amount, you can't take that. But that's been in the news recently as well. So, if you file as a professional, you got to pay self-employment tax, but half of it's an adjustment. You could qualify for the QBI and pass through 20%. It's all a case-by-case situational type of thing. But I always give a little bit of giggle to, especially now, you're sitting at a poker table and a guy wins like a $10,000 bad beat jackpot. He doesn't claim wins or losses ever, right? He doesn't play tournaments. He doesn't keep a log. He doesn't keep a diary. He's like, I'm just going to write that off. I'll just write that off as a loss. Of course, he has no idea that that would be a dumb thing to actually write that off, right? Because the standard deduction is going to be larger, especially at the married filing jointly level than itemizing to write that bit off. One last thing too is that the IRS, what are they looking for records? They're looking for if you were ever audited, both recreational or professional. They are looking for a contemporaneous log of your wins and losses by session. And I've asked this question to a few tax professionals before too. It doesn't necessarily have to be written. Apparently, I did a podcast, which I'll also put in the description. A few years ago, I did several podcasts with Russ where I asked him this question, where the rules said that it used to have to be a written diary. now that we've sort of expanded to being like more electronic, it doesn't, but you have to prove that they're contemporaneous. What that means is that you have to prove that the records weren't just made yesterday. So if you're using like a poker app, one of the best ways to basically do that is to export the records every single month, like email them to yourself, so that at the end of a year, you have 12 different records from each month. And if you ever get audited and the IRS guy went to April, he would see that the February records were the same as if he went to your March export, and so on and so on. It's basically consistent records throughout the year. And you're like, listen, I emailed this on April 1st for March. Here it is. I've got 12 different records. This proves that this was contemporaneous. It wasn't just formed basically, overnight. So I love this topic. Like I said, I am not a tax professional, but I feel like I have a good grasp of it. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, I will certainly do so in the description and or in the comment section. And again, I will put my own tax preparer, Russ Fox's information in the description as well. Again, if you like this video, please hit that like button.